Hello everybody, Carl Schoof here, and I'm back with my presentation on TimelineLite Ultimate Starter Guide. In part 2, I'm going to be talking about the basic methods and properties of TimelineLite that will allow you to get up and running and start creating incredible and flexible animations. Open in Chrome right now, I have a Swift. Let's show it to you. Vroom. That sound effect was mine. And we just have a series of tweens going on, and while the animation is playing, this red bar is tracking the progress of the entire timeline. So we're going to build up this example from scratch, and along the way we're going to be talking about the insert, append, and prepend method, which are the most common methods you'll be using to getting tweens into your TimelineLite. As we talk about these things, I'll show you some of the basic properties and constructor vars that you'll be using when you're creating your TimelineLites. So everything that we talk about today is really going to act as a foundation for more of the advanced things that we'll be doing in the future. Let's jump over to Flash and start building this animation. Here we are in Flash CS5. Let's take a look at some of the assets I'll be working with. On the stage I have a number of the movie clips that I'm going to be tweening. Most notably, the star of our movie is GTI MC. Now we're going to be animating this car onto the stage and we're going to be spinning its wheels. So inside of GTI MC I have Wheel 1 MC and also Wheel 2 MC. We'll be targeting those in our script. Back on scene 1, once the car comes in, this text that says "Hello, I'm back" is going to come in, and then it's going to say "in 4 new colors," and lastly this little text called "But I prefer black" is going to pop up. Now I'm not going to be using "in 4 new colors" immediately right now, so I'm going to just take it and move it off stage so I don't see it until I need it. And I'm going to do the same thing with my "but I prefer black." Let's just move it off stage because I don't want to be visually cluttered with assets that I'm not working with. So right now we have "Hello, I'm back" on the stage and the car, and here is our red progress MC, which we're going to use to visualize the playback progress of our entire timeline. And I also have this black rectangle on stage called cover MC, just in case I need to use it at some point in time. So this file here is using the document class of timeline demo. Let's jump into our code. In timeline demo AS, I have a basic package set up. I'm importing the common events and mouse events that I'll be using, as well as the green sock package. And I'm defining some references to those movie clips that I have on stage here. And I'm using some variables that refer to different color values because I'm going to be changing the tint of that car over time. And I've also created a reference to the TimelineLite that I will be using. I'm going to reference it via TL, okay, just to save me some typing. Once my project initializes in the init function, I'm going to instantiate my TimelineLite. In order to do that, I'm going to just say TL equals new TimelineLite. And there's our basic TimelineLite constructor. That's all we need. I'm going to show you later on how we can put some specific vars in here, such as an onComplete function, an onUpdate. We'll set the delay, the timescale, all inside the special vars object. But right now, we're going to keep it simple. Now, when I create a new TimelineLite, it works very similarly to how a nested movie clip animation would work inside of the Flash IDE, in that a TimelineLite is really just a container for a series of tweens. And what I need to do now that I have a TimelineLite, it's just like a blank movie clip if you will, I need to add some tweens to it. And in order to do that, I'm going to be illustrating the 3 basic methods: insert, append, and prepend. And the first one I'm going to start out with is insert. And I'm going to tell my TimelineLite to insert a tween for me, okay? And the code completion that I get here tells me that I need to insert a tween, which needs to be a tween core object. Now that just means it can be a tween light, a tween max, a timeline light, or a timeline max. You can nest timeline lights inside of other timeline lights. For now though, we're just going to start with a simple tween max, and we're going to move that car onto the stage and we're going to deblur it. Since we're using the blur filter, I'm just going to use tween max, which automatically activates that filter for me, or I should say plugin. I'm going to say tween max dot from, and this tween is going to take GTI MC, and I'll start it slow. Over the course of 1 second, I'm going to come from an X of, let's say, -500, And we're also going to use the blur filter, and we're just going to specify that the blur X should be 140. So we'll close out the blur filter object, the Vars object, and here we close out the tween. And we're putting that tween, remember, inside the insert method. So insert includes this first line of tween code here. So by doing that, this tween is going to go at a position of 0. The insert method will put a tween at a specific time in your timeline. If you don't specify a time, it's going to go at the beginning or at a position of 0 seconds. So let's just see how that works. I'm going to save this file and let's test it out. And now you'll see that that car, over the process of 1 second, moves in and deblurs. All right, pretty clever. That hello, I'm back text is visible by default because it's on the stage and I haven't done any tweens to it yet. We're going to introduce that in just a moment. So right now, there's my insert of my first tween. Now, if I wanted this tween to happen later, I could put in a second parameter, which is the time. Now, this could be a time or label. We'll be discussing labels in the future. But now I'm saying don't insert this tween until exactly 2 seconds into that TimelineLite playing. So I'll save and test. 1, 2, there you go. So now I've offset the start time of that tween. I don't really need that to be in there, so I'm going to get rid of it. So I just want this tween to start immediately. Now, while that car is sliding, it would be great, wouldn't it, if those wheels actually spun like that. Yep, it's just sliding right now. So let's do this. Let's add another tween, and we want to have this tween play exactly at the same time as the previous one. So we'll be using insert again. And I'm going to say, let's do a TweenLite dot from, and I want to target the GTI MC's wheel 1 MC, and we're going to take 1 second, and we're just going to do a rotation from -180. So that's just going to give my car's wheel a little bit of spin. So I close out the tween with that parenthesis, and then I'm going to close out the insert method there. So let's save this and test, and you should see that that back wheel now is spinning to a stop. All right, the front wheel looks like the brake's locked up, so to get rid of that, we're going to just copy this line right here, and we'll paste it in and just change the reference to wheel 2MC. So now I have the car sliding in and 2 wheels spinning all at the same time, exactly when that TimelineLite begins. Now, an important thing to point out here, which might seem obvious, is that this TimelineLite plays automatically. As soon as it's created, it starts playing. I don't need to specifically tell it to play. And that's just a default behavior of TimelineLite and TimelineMax. And also, you'll notice that it's also a behavior of TweenMax and TweenLite. You don't need to tell those tweens to play. You just create them and they go, and that's great. If I wanted to pause this timeline, well, I could do 2 things. I could say TL.pause. Now we'll test my movie out, and you'll see it is paused. We'll be talking about the pause method in a future tutorial a little bit more, but I can also now start talking about the constructor vars that can be passed in. If we go over to our documentation really quick, you'll see that when we talk about the TimelineLite vars object, let's just click down here, you'll see that there are all these different special properties. And we can pass in a paused value, which is a Boolean of true or false, and it says sets the initial pause state of the timeline. So if I wanted to experiment with that really quickly, I can go back to Flash, and inside the constructor here, I can say paused true. And I put that inside of the curly brackets because this is an object that can contain many properties. So we'll save that, and now it's the same thing. My movie doesn't play unless I invoked a play command. So we don't need to pause it right now, but I will leave that empty vars object there for the future. So as a refresher, insert will place a tween inside the timeline at a specific point in time. If we don't specify that point in time, it's going to be at the very beginning of the timeline. Now, append, on the other hand, adds tweens to your timeline relative to the end of the timeline. And that means that if I append a tween to a timeline, it goes directly at the end. But I can optionally offset when it gets added relative to the end by putting in an offset value. Once these tweens have finished, I want to introduce that text that says, hello, I'm back. So I'm going to say tl.append, which means add to the end of the timeline. And I'm going to say a tween max.from. And what I'm going to be tweening right now is hello MC. We're going to take 0.5 seconds, and we're just going to start basic with having the alpha from a value of 0. So let's close that tween out, and we can't forget this last paren there. So now that tween isn't going to happen until after all these previous tweens have completed. So let's save and test it out. The car rolls to a stop, and then hello, I'm back comes in. And it happens immediately after those 3 tweens end. Now, I really want to investigate how this works. So I want to show you that this doesn't happen directly after the 3rd tween ends. It happens at the end of the timeline. So let's just say that wheel 1, this middle tween here, takes 5 seconds, okay? Well, all of these tweens are going to start at the same time, but since this tween is longer, the append is going to wait for that tween to end until it starts playing this one that I just added. So 5 seconds is a little bit ridiculous. Let's make it 3. We'll save and test. And so now you'll see that this wheel is still spinning, and when it's done, it says, hello, I'm back. You may have missed that, so let me just do negative 360 here. Sorry about that. One more time. So now that wheel stops spinning, and then the append did tween works. So again, it's going to wait until everything prior has finished. I'm going to bring that back down to 1. And in fact, I want these things to all come on really quick. So let's save some time and make it all 0.5 for these tweens. Okay, so once that text comes in, I want it to sit up there for a little bit and then fade out. Now what I'm going to do now is more specific to Tween Max than it is to TimelineLite, but I'm going to give this tween a repeat of 1, and I'm going to say that the repeat delay is going to be 1 second. That means it's going to wait 1 second before it repeats. And let me just do that right now. And that repeat means hello, I'm back is going to come in twice. So it comes in once and then twice. Well, that's not what I want. So I'm going to say that it's going to yo-yo, which means it's going to play backwards. So I'm going to say yo-yo, true. So that 1 repeat means it's going to play once in the opposite direction. And I'm pretty much set. So let's test that. Hello, I'm back. And then 1 second later, that text goes away. I'm going to keep the timing fairly quick so that we don't need to watch this entire animation and wait for it every time. So we're going to keep things running smoothly. Now, just like the insert method takes in 2 parameters, the tween, and in the case of insert, the time at which the tween will start, the append method will take in a tween and also an offset value, which means that I can say, I want this tween to happen 2 seconds after the previous tweens have finished. So now I'm going to test that out. The car comes in, 2 seconds later, hello, I'm back shows up, and then it fades away. So with a positive offset value, that means it's going to wait 2 seconds until all of this ends. Now, I'm also can put in a negative value here. I could say negative 0.5, and what that's going to do is literally start it when all of these other tweens start. Since they all have a duration of 0.5, well, the end of the timeline is 0.5 seconds in, and I'm going to subtract that 0.5 right here. And so now append is sort of working like an insert would, in that all those tweens happen at the same time. That's not what I want. I want it to be a little bit of a pause there, so let's just say that this is going to be a positive number. Let's test it out. And before I do that, let's also change this number, back to negative 180. We don't need that back wheel spinning more than the others. And I'm going to test, and there you go. So hello, I'm back. it works, and the text fades away. Once that text fades away, I'm going to introduce the in 4 new colors text, and I'm also going to have the color of the body change. Now, before I move forward, I just want to go into my FLA, and I'm going to reposition these objects that I moved off the stage. So I should be able to just undo a little bit. There, you're back, and in 4 new colors should be down there. So everything's good. Let's save it. Now, the reason why I moved those things off the stage is for this reason here. Let me test my movie out now, and you'll see that in 4 new colors is getting in the way of that other text. I didn't want to see that while I was testing my animation. That's why I moved it off. But this text here will be invisible as soon as I put in that from tween that says tween from an alpha of 0. As soon as you initialize a from tween, it sets the starting value as you specify. Let's go back into my timeline demo, and what I'm going to do is my super fantastic cheat move, which allows me to just paste some code in here that we're going to use. I've talked about the different settings in append and insert quite a bit, so now I'm just going to append some more tweens, and you'll see exactly what's happening. So everything from here on down is new. And once my hello text fades out, we just talked about that, I'm going to tell the colors MC, which says 4 new colors, to take 0.5 seconds and to fade in from an alpha of 0. And this 0.5 offset parameter means it's going to wait 0.5 seconds until that other tween finishes. Just for the sake of repetition, let's make that a 1 so you can really see the difference here. We'll test, and once hello I'm back fades out, we'll wait 1 second, and 4 new colors comes on, and then those tint tweens are happening in succession. So let's just walk through this really quick. It's just a series of appends. So we're bringing in 4 new colors, and then we're appending the tint to blue, the tint to red, and the tint to black. And each of these are appended with a 0.5 second delay. Okay, once that last tint color changes, well, then black MC comes in at the bottom that says, I prefer black. So pretty much that's fast forward to this project being completed, but it's a lot of the same stuff. So I didn't want to type out each line in test individually. And I know you thank me, and you are welcome. So what I do want to point out, just very briefly, is that when we're inserting multiple tweens at the same time, or if we're appending multiple tweens with the same offset values, there are insert multiple and append multiple methods that allow you to take all 3 of these tweens and put them into one append multiple method. For now, as an introduction to insert and append, I really think you have an idea of how insert works and how append works. Now, there's one other method that I want to discuss in this tutorial called the Prepend method. And Prepend allows you to add tweens to the beginning of a timeline after the timeline has been created, and it will push all the tweens that were already in the timeline out of the way. Now, I use insert and append all the time. In fact, append is probably the one I use the most. Insert is a close second, and quite honestly, I don't use prepend all that much, but it's important for you to know. So in the context of this Swift that I have running here, where I'm very happy with its performance and how everything is working, look at all that. It's all done with the timeline, but I prefer black. Ha ha ha. It's funny. Now let's just say that our client loves this, our art director loves it, everybody's in love with it, but they say, you know what? It's so great, but we want to just build a little bit of excitement. We want that drama in the beginning. Well, there's no better way to add excitement and anticipation to an animation than to have a black rectangle take a long time to reveal your stage. So I've been working with this crew for a while now, and I knew this request was coming. So here we have something called Cover MC. And let's just say that somebody requested that this black box here starts at the top and reveals my beautiful subtle gradient background covered stage. So I'm going to go to TimelineDemo.as, and I might just say, oh, you want to add another tween in the beginning? Well, let's just do it right here. I'm going to say tl.insert TweenLite.from, and I'm going to take that cover MC, and we're going to take 3 seconds. We're going to have a lot of anticipation here. Let's tween it from a y value of 0. Okay? So this is the first tween that I'm now putting in my timeline. So you're saying, okay, that should happen first, and then maybe all this other stuff will follow. Well, not so quick. Let's save this and test it and watch what happens. Yes, that black box comes down, but you'll notice that, hey, the car is already there. What's happening? Well, the thing that's happening is that these inserted tweens right here are all happening at the same time that this is happening, and we don't see it. So in order for this ill-conceived tween here to be added to the beginning of the timeline, I would have to then say, oh, nuts. This tween takes 3 seconds. I need to add 3 seconds to each one of these 3 tweens here that have been inserted at a position of 0 seconds. Well, fortunately, I don't have to then offset all the start times of the subsequent tweens. I'm going to cut out that line there, and at the end of my timeline, once it's all built, I'm going to use the Prepend method. And the Prepend method is sort of like, oops, I forgot to add something, let me do it now. So Prepend is going to put this cover MC coming down at the beginning of my TimelineLite animation, and it's going to automatically push these 3 guys out of the way. The whole animation of the car sliding in with the wheel spinning won't happen until after this prepended tween takes place. Now I want to get back into the TimelineLite constructor and just show you some of the basic properties that we can pass in here. And one thing I love, and I showed this in the first video, is I can set the overall time scale for an animation. By default, the time scale is going to be 1, which means it's going to play at its natural speed. But the time scale is sort of a factor of the overall time. And if my art director says, I love the animation, but make it play twice as fast, well, I wouldn't want to have to change the durations and offset values of all these tweens, so I can take the time scale property and say, okay, let's set that to 2. And now this is going to play like butter. Boom, boom. And now it's playing twice as fast. All the offset values and the tween durations have been multiplied by 2. If I want to slow it down a little bit, I can say play at half speed. So time scale is going to be 0.5. And now I'm slowing everything down. That was pretty quick to begin with, so this pacing actually might be acceptable. That delay there is a little long, but you get the idea. I have now a global control over the timing of the entire animation. I've already talked about putting a pause value in here. If I want my timeline to start a little bit later, I can say put a delay of 1 second in there. Very handy, this Vars object that we have. So now I have 1 second to soak in that black box there, and then the animation plays. I want to talk about 2 events that we can respond to in the TimelineLite, and the first one is an onComplete. Suppose once our animation ends, then we want to start loading in other assets, or maybe we want to start another timeline. We could do any number of things. I'm going to say onComplete, let's call the complete handler function. Okay, so this is the name of a function that's going to be called when the timeline is done playing. So I'm just going to scroll down here, and I have an event handlers comment. Perfect. I'm going to say that private function complete handler, oh look, I can type again, is going to return void, and I'm just going to do a very simple trace. I'm going to say trace timeline is finished. Okay, and again, you could have any action happen here that you want. So let's save this, and let's just make sure my output window is sort of visible. I'll drag it up there for everybody to see. Let's give myself some space, and let's test our movie out. So once the animation finishes, when that text comes in, timeline is finished. So once that fade totally finishes, I can respond to it. Now I'm also going to show you the onUpdate event, which is really handy because this allows me to always track the progress of my timeline. So let's say onUpdate is going to be update handler, okay? And now this works very similarly to how an enter frame event would work, but it only is going to run when the progress of the TimelineLite has changed. So as the timeline is playing, onUpdate is going to be constantly firing. So let's just change the name of this to our update handler. Okay. And what you're going to see is that, let's trace out something like timeline is playing. Okay. Not going to be the most useful thing in the world right now, but let's save. And now you'll see that my traces in my output, I constantly get timeline is playing, just repeating over and over again. So that's a little bit wasteful. But what I can do is track the current progress of my entire animation. So inside of my update handler, I'm going to tell my progress MC, remember that red bar that we had? I'm going to say that your scale X property is going to be the same as my timeline's current progress. Now, current progress gives us a value between 0 and 1, 1 being the full progress of our timeline. So let's save that, and now check it out. You'll see that this red bar is growing because the X scale is matching the current progress. Both values are between 0 and 1. And when the animation is finished, that red bar stops growing. So just a way to show you how we can access current progress. Current progress is a read-write property. So not only can I figure out what it is, but I can also set it. And if you remember back to the first video, I showed you that you could use a slider component to scrub through your TimelineLite. Well, what we do with the slider is that we tell it to set the current progress to a value of 0 to 1, and then you can scrub all the way through. I'll be dropping a slider component into one of the future tutorials. But current progress, I can show you how we set it right here. Once my timeline is built, I could say TL.currentProgress equals 0.5. And I'm also going to pause the timeline as well. I could say paused equals true, or I could just use the pause method. So here I'm going to pause the timeline right in the middle by setting current progress equal to 0.5. So let's test this out. And now the timeline is paused in the middle, and my progress bar is only half as wide as it can be. So that's handy as well. And lastly, let me just show you the duration. I'm going to trace out duration equals plus TL dot duration. Okay? And I'm guessing I'm somewhere around 8 seconds. Let me get my output panel and drag it over here, and we'll test. What do you know? I was very, very close. So there's a duration of my timeline. Now, there are a lot more properties that we're going to be discussing over time, but I want to just show you these basics again in addition to those methods. So let's just jump back over to the documentation, and there are a whole bunch of properties that you can set inside of that special properties Vars object that we were talking about. And we can use more than one. I've been deleting and adding new ones, but you can have multiple properties set in the constructor, and you can read all about them here. And also, for all the methods that we've been discussing, there are so many more, and I really suggest that you go in here and take a look at them. So folks, that's going to wrap up our introduction to the basic properties and methods, and stay tuned as we talk about adding labels, navigating your timeline max, advanced sequencing with append multiple and prepend multiple. There's a whole lot more that I'm going to be covering. Thanks for watching.